The soul rain was relentless, mirroring the storm raging inside Park Seo-joon.
He stared out the panoramic window of his penthouse apartment, the city lights blurring into an indistinguishable smear of color.
Below, the Han River flowed, dark and indifferent.
He felt equally indifferent, a hollow ache where joy used to reside.
His son, Min-joon, lay asleep in the next room, or at least, he hoped he was asleep.
Most nights were a battle against a relentless, inexplicable fever that stole the light from the boy's eyes.
Seo-joon turned away from the window, the weight of the city pressing down on him. $2 million. An obscene amount of money, really. Enough to buy a small island, a fleet of luxury cars. But it was utterly useless against the invisible enemy that was slowly consuming his son. He had consulted the best doctors in the world, flown Min-joon to specialist after specialist. Each diagnosis offered a different, equally bleak prognosis. Each treatment, a fleeting hope followed by crushing disappointment. He had reached a point of desperation he never thought possible. That desperation had led him to this, a public offer, a plea broadcast across social media and news outlets, $2 million to anyone who could cure Min-joon. He knew it was a long shot, a gamble born of grief and exhaustion. But what else was left? The doorbell chimed, a jarring sound that sliced through the silence. Seo-joon hesitated.
His housekeeper, Mrs. Kim, was already gone for the night.
He hadn't expected anyone.
He glanced at the security monitor. A young woman stood patiently in the hallway, her face obscured by the low lighting.
She looked ordinary.
Not the kind of person he imagined would answer a $2 million challenge.
He pressed the intercom button.
Yes? A soft voice, tinged with a slight Busan accent, replied, Mr. Park?
My name is Hannah.
I saw your offer.
Seo-joon sighed. Another well-meaning but ultimately ineffective attempt.
He was tempted to simply dismiss her, to tell her he was no longer accepting applications. He was tired of the false hope, the polite smiles that masked pity.
Mr. Park?
Hannah repeated, her voice a little louder this time.
May I come in? I think I can help.
Something in her tone, a quiet confidence that defied the circumstances, stopped him. He was a businessman, trained to assess people, to read between the lines. And he sensed something genuine in her voice, something that wasn't driven by greed or desperation. He buzzed her in, his heart a leaden weight in his chest.
He walked to the living room, straightening his tie, trying to compose himself.
He couldn't afford to show her the raw, unraveling grief that threatened to consume him.
The elevator doors opened, and Hannah stepped out. She was even more unassuming in person. Small, with kind eyes and a simple, unassuming dress.
She carried a worn leather bag slung across her shoulder. She looked more like a student than a miracle worker. Thank you for seeing me, Mr. Park, she said, bowing slightly.
Please, have a seat, Seo-joon gestured to the sofa.
He remained standing, a silent sentinel guarding his son's fragile health.
You said you think you can help. With what credentials?
Hannah sat down, placing her bag carefully on the floor. She looked directly at him, her gaze unwavering.
I don't have any medical credentials, Mr. Park. I'm not a doctor. But I understand energy.
And I understand Min-joon's energy is blocked.
Seo-joon raised an eyebrow, skepticism etched on his face. Energy? Are you suggesting alternative medicine?
Not exactly, Hannah replied.
It's more ancient knowledge. Passed down through generations in my family. We call it Gi-un healer.
He wanted to laugh, to dismiss her as a charlatan preying on his vulnerability.
But something held him back. He had tried everything else.
What did he have to lose? And how does this Gi-un healer work, he asked, his voice laced with cynicism. I need to be near Min-joon, to feel his energy, Hannah explained. I need to understand what's causing the blockage. It could be physical, emotional, even spiritual.
Seo-joon hesitated.
Allowing a stranger near his son felt like a violation, a betrayal of his paternal duty. But the desperation was a constant hum beneath his skin, a relentless siren call. All right, he said finally, the word heavy on his tongue.
You can see him. But Mrs. Kim will be present at all times. And if I see anything that makes me uncomfortable, you'll be out of this apartment faster than you can blink. Hannah nodded, understanding in her eyes. Of course, Mr. Park. I understand. I only want to help Min-joon.
He led her to Min-joon's room, his heart pounding in his chest. He pushed the door open, and Hannah stepped inside, her eyes immediately drawn to the sleeping boy. Min-joon lay still beneath the covers, his face pale and drawn. The rhythmic beeping of the heart monitor filled the room, a constant reminder of his precarious state. Hannah approached the bed slowly, her movements deliberate and respectful. She stood beside Min-joon for a long moment, her eyes closed, her hand hovering just above his chest. Seo-joon watched her, his skepticism warring with a desperate flicker of hope. Mrs. Kim stood silently in the corner, her face a mask of concern. Suddenly, Hannah gasped, her eyes snapping open. She took a step back, her face etched with a mixture of surprise and understanding.
What is it?
Seo-joon demanded, his voice tight with anxiety.
What do you see?
Hannah looked at him, her eyes filled with a strange mixture of pity and determination. He's not just sick, Mr. Park, she said softly.
He's lonely. Seo-joon frowned, confusion clouding his features. Lonely? What are you talking about?
He has me, Mrs. Kim, he has everything he could possibly need. He gestured around the expensively decorated room, filled with toys and gadgets any child would envy.
He's never alone. Hannah shook her head gently. Not that kind of lonely, Mr. Park. This is a deeper loneliness. A loneliness of the spirit. He's missing something, someone.
She glanced around the room, her gaze lingering on the expensive toys, as if searching for the missing piece of the puzzle.
These things, they don't fill the void.
Mrs. Kim stepped forward, her brow furrowed with concern. Mr. Park, perhaps Miss Hannah is sensing something we haven't noticed. Min-joon has been withdrawn lately, even more so than usual. He barely touches his food, and he refuses to play with his toys. Seo-joon felt a pang of guilt. He had been so focused on finding a physical cure for Min-joon that he had neglected his emotional well-being. He had been so busy with work, so consumed by his own fear, that he had failed to truly see his son. What do you suggest? He asked Hannah, his voice softening. He was willing to try anything, even if it seemed illogical.
He needs connection, Hannah said firmly. He needs genuine human interaction. He needs a friend.
The word hung in the air, heavy with implications.
Seo-joon hadn't considered that Min-joon might simply be lonely.
He had assumed his son's withdrawal was a symptom of his illness, not a cause. A friend, he repeated, his voice laced with disbelief.
He's bedridden. He can barely sit up on his own. How is he supposed to make friends?
I have an idea, Hannah said, a spark of determination in her eyes.
But it's unconventional.
And it will require your trust.
Seo-joon hesitated.
He had already placed a considerable amount of trust in this stranger, a woman who claimed to understand the flow of energy. But he was desperate, and he could see the genuine concern in her eyes. What is it? He asked, bracing himself for another unexpected suggestion.
Hannah took a deep breath. I have a younger sister. Her name is So-hee. She's different.
She has a gift for connecting with people, especially children.
She's also very ill.
She's been bedridden for years, suffering from a rare genetic disorder. But she's full of life, full of joy.
I think Min-joon and So-hee could help each other.
Seo-joon stared at her, speechless.
He couldn't believe what he was hearing. She was suggesting he introduce his sick son to another sick child? It seemed cruel, almost perverse.
I don't understand, he said, his voice tight with confusion.
How would that help? They're both ill. Wouldn't that just make things worse? Not necessarily, Hannah replied. Sometimes, the best medicine is companionship. Sometimes, the best cure is simply knowing you're not alone. So he understands what Min-jun is going through. She knows what it's like to be confined to a bed, to be isolated from the world. She can offer him something that I, or you, or even the best doctors in the world, cannot: empathy.
Mrs. Kim nodded slowly, her eyes filled with understanding.
It's true, Mr. Park.
Min-jun needs someone who understands him, someone who can relate to his struggles.
Perhaps this could be the answer.
Seo-joon looked at Min-jun, his small face pale and fragile against the white pillow.
He thought about his son's vacant eyes, his lack of interest in the world around him. He thought about the loneliness that Hannah had sensed, the void that no amount of money or toys could fill. He knew it was a risk.
Introducing Min-jun to another sick child could be emotionally draining, even detrimental. But he also knew that he had to try something, anything, to break through the wall of despair that had enveloped his son.
"All right," he said finally, his voice barely a whisper. "Let's do it. Let's bring your sister here. But I'm warning you, Hannah. If this doesn't work, if it makes things worse, I won't hesitate to hold you responsible."
Hannah nodded, her eyes shining with gratitude.
"Thank you, Mr. Park. I promise you won't regret this."
So he is special. She has a way of bringing light into even the darkest of places.
The next day, Hannah arrived with Seo-hee.
Seo-hee was even smaller and more frail than Hannah had described. She was confined to a wheelchair, her body thin and delicate, her face pale. But her eyes were alive with a spark of intelligence and kindness. They were the eyes of someone who had seen suffering, but who had refused to be defeated by it. Seo-joon watched as Hannah carefully wheeled Seo-hee into Min-jun's room. He stood back, his heart pounding in his chest, unsure of what to expect.
Mrs. Kim hovered nearby, ready to intervene if necessary.
So he stopped beside Min-jun's bed and smiled at him. It was a small, tentative smile, but it was genuine. "Hello, Min-jun," she said softly, her voice surprisingly strong.
"My name is Seo-hee. Your mom told me you like airplanes." "I do too."
Min-jun blinked, his eyes widening slightly. He hadn't spoken in days, hadn't shown any interest in anything. But now, he was looking at Seo-hee, his expression curious.
Hello," he whispered, his voice raspy from disuse.
Seo-hee's smile widened. "I brought you something," she said, reaching into a small bag attached to her wheelchair. She pulled out a model airplane, carefully crafted from balsa wood.
"I made it myself." Min-jun reached out a hesitant hand and took the airplane.
He examined it carefully, his fingers tracing the delicate wings, the tiny propeller. A faint smile flickered across his lips. "It's beautiful," he said softly. "I can show you how to make one," Seo-hee said eagerly.
"It's really fun."
And just like that, a connection was made.
A connection between two lonely souls, two children who understood each other's pain. Seo-joon watched from the doorway, tears welling up in his eyes.
He had been so focused on finding a cure, on fixing his son's physical ailments, that he had forgotten the simple power of human connection. Over the next few days, Seo-hee became a regular visitor to Min-jun's room. She told him stories, read him books, and taught him how to build model airplanes. She shared her laughter, her dreams, and her unwavering spirit. And slowly, gradually, Min-jun began to come back to life. He started eating again, his appetite returning with a vengeance. He started talking, his voice growing stronger each day. He started laughing, his laughter filling the room with joy. He even started asking to sit up in bed, eager to participate in Seo-hee's activities. Seo-joon watched in amazement as his son transformed before his very eyes. The fevers still came and went, but they were less frequent, less severe. And even when Min-jun was sick, he was no longer consumed by despair. He had Seo-hee, his friend, his companion, his source of strength. One afternoon, Seo-joon found Min-jun and Seo-hee sitting side by side, working on a model airplane. Min-jun was laughing, his face flushed with excitement. Seo-joon stood in the doorway, watching them, his heart overflowing with gratitude. He knew that Seo-hee wasn't a miracle worker. She hadn't cured Min-jun's illness. But she had given him something even more valuable: hope.
She had shown him that even in the darkest of times, there was still light to be found. She had reminded him that he wasn't alone. He walked into the room and knelt beside Min-joon, placing a hand on his shoulder. "Thank you," he whispered, his voice thick with emotion. "Thank you for bringing Seo-hee into our lives." Min-joon looked up at him and smiled. "She's my best friend, Dad." Seo-joon smiled back, his eyes filled with tears. He looked at Hannah, who was standing in the corner, watching the scene unfold. He walked over to her and took her hand. "You were right," he said softly. "He needed a friend. You surprised everyone." Hannah smiled, her eyes shining with happiness. "I just knew they could help each other, Mr. Park. Sometimes, the simplest things are the most powerful." Seo-joon knew that Hannah was right. He had been so focused on finding a complicated, expensive cure for his son that he had overlooked the most obvious solution: love, friendship, and human connection. He still didn't understand how Hannah had known about Min-joon's loneliness, how she had sensed the void that needed to be filled. But he didn't need to understand. He was simply grateful that she had come into their lives, bringing with her a ray of hope and a friendship that had changed everything. The $2 million he offered seemed insignificant now. He had gained something far more valuable. A happy son. And a lesson he would never forget. The value of true human connection. Seo-joon turned back to Seo-hee, who was carefully guiding Min-joon's hand as he glued a small piece onto the airplane wing. He knelt down beside her wheelchair, his gaze earnest. "Seo-hee," he began, choosing his words carefully, "I offered a reward, a large sum of money, for anyone who could help Min-joon. But what you've given him, it's priceless. More valuable than anything I could ever offer." Seo-hee looked up, her brow furrowed slightly. "I didn't do it for the money, Mr. Park. I know what it's like to be lonely and sick. I wanted to help." "I know," Seo-joon said, sincerity etched on his face. "And I am eternally grateful. But I still want to do something for you. Is there anything at all that I can do to repay your kindness?" So he hesitated for a moment, then her eyes lit up. "Actually," she said, a mischievous glint in her eye, "there is one thing." Seo-joon leaned in, eager to grant her wish. "Anything," he repeated. "I've always wanted to go to the beach," so he said, her voice filled with longing. "But it's difficult for me to get around. I've never been able to go." A wave of guilt washed over Seo-joon. He had been so caught up in his own problems that he hadn't even considered Seo-hee's. He glanced at her wheelchair, then back at her hopeful face. "The beach," he repeated. "Of course. We can do that. We'll go to the beach. As soon as possible." And so, the next day, Seo-joon arranged for a trip to the coast. He hired a private ambulance equipped with the necessary medical equipment and personnel to ensure Min-joon's safety and comfort. He also made sure that Seo-hee's needs were taken care of, providing her with a comfortable beach chair and a personal assistant to help her navigate the sandy terrain. The drive to the beach was filled with anticipation. Min-joon and Seo-hee sat side by side in the ambulance, chattering excitedly about the ocean, the sand, and the seashells they hoped to find. Seo-joon sat in the front, watching them in the rearview mirror, his heart swelling with happiness. When they finally arrived at the beach, Min-joon gasped in awe. He had never seen anything so beautiful. The endless expanse of blue water, the white sand stretching as far as the eye could see, the seagulls soaring overhead, it was a sensory overload in the best possible way. Seo-hee, too, was captivated by the scene. Her eyes widened as she took in the sights and sounds of the ocean. She closed her eyes for a moment, inhaling the salty air and feeling the gentle breeze on her face. A peaceful smile spread across her lips. Seo-joon carefully lifted Min-joon out of the ambulance and carried him to a spot near the water's edge. He then helped Seo-hee transfer to her beach chair, ensuring that she was comfortable and had a clear view of the ocean. Min-joon immediately ran towards the water, splashing and laughing as the waves crashed against his feet. Seo-hee watched him with a smile, her eyes filled with joy. Seo-joon sat down beside Seo-hee, watching his son play. "Thank you," he said softly. "For everything." Seo-hee turned to him, her eyes meeting his. You don't have to thank me, Mr. Park. I'm just happy to see Min-jun so happy. They sat in silence for a while, watching the ocean and enjoying the warmth of the sun. Then, so he turned to Seo-joon and said, "You know, Mr. Park, Min-jun is lucky to have you as a father." Seo-joon looked at her, surprised. "What do you mean?" "You're willing to do anything for him," so he said. "You're strong, and you never give up. That's what every child needs." Seo-joon was touched by her words. He had always tried to be a good father to Min-jun, but he often felt inadequate. He worked long hours, and he wasn't always there for his son when he needed him. "I try," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "But sometimes, I feel like I'm failing him." "You're not failing him," so he said firmly. "You're doing the best you can. And that's all anyone can ask for." Seo-joon smiled, feeling a sense of relief wash over him. He knew that, so he was right. He was doing the best he could. And with the help of people like Sohee and Hannah, he knew that Min-jun would be okay. As the sun began to set, casting a golden glow over the ocean, Seo-joon gathered Min-jun and Sohee and prepared to head back to Seoul. The trip to the beach had been a success. Min-jun was happy and healthy, and Sohee had finally gotten to experience the ocean. Back at home, Seo-joon sat in his study, reflecting on the events of the past few weeks. He had learned a valuable lesson about the importance of human connection, and he was grateful for the people who had helped him and Min-jun along the way. He picked up his phone and dialed a number. "Hannah," he said, his voice filled with warmth. "I was wondering if you were free for dinner tomorrow night. I want to thank you properly for everything you've done." Hannah's voice on the other end of the line was filled with surprise and delight. "I would love to, Mr. Park," she said. "Thank you." Seo-joon smiled. He knew that his life had changed forever. He was no longer just a wealthy businessman. He was a father, a friend, and a man who had learned the true meaning of happiness. And he owed it all to a little boy, a young woman in a wheelchair, and a caregiver who surprised everyone. The dinner with Hannah was pleasant, filled with light conversation and genuine gratitude. Seo-joon found himself drawn to her quiet strength and unwavering belief in something beyond the tangible. He carefully avoided any direct questioning about her methods, respecting her boundaries and focusing on expressing his appreciation. Mrs. Kim, ever observant, offered knowing glances throughout the evening, a silent approval radiating from her presence. The days that followed settled into a new rhythm. Min-jun continued to improve, his energy levels soaring. The fever remained at bay, replaced by a vibrant curiosity and a renewed zest for life. Seo-joon dedicated more time to his son, reading him stories, building elaborate Lego castles, and simply being present. He even started shutting off his phone during these precious hours, a previously unthinkable act that now felt essential. Hannah visited regularly, not as a miracle worker, but as a friend. She would play games with Min-jun, tell him fantastical stories of faraway lands, and teach him simple meditation techniques to help him calm his mind. She never explicitly spoke of curing him, but rather of helping him find balance and inner peace. One afternoon, while Min-jun was napping, Seo-joon found Hannah sitting on the balcony, gazing out at the cityscape. He joined her, a comfortable silence settling between them. "He's doing so well," Seo-joon finally said, breaking the quiet. I don't know how to thank you enough." Hannah turned to him, her eyes gentle. "You've already thanked me, Mr. Park. By opening your heart and being present for your son." "But, the 2 million, Seo-joon began, feeling obligated to broach the subject. "You haven't mentioned it." Hannah smiled softly. "I didn't do this for the money, Mr. Park. I saw Min-jun's light, and I knew I could help him. The money is irrelevant." Seo-joon was taken aback by her sincerity. He had grown accustomed to a world driven by profit and ambition, where everything had a price. Hannah's selfless act was a stark contrast, a refreshing reminder that some things are truly priceless. "But I want to give you something," he insisted. "You deserve it." Hannah considered his words for a moment. "All right," she said finally. "There is something you can do." Seo-joon leaned in, eager to fulfill her request. "Anything."
Use the money to help other children, Hannah said, her voice firm. Create a foundation, a scholarship fund, something that will give other children the opportunity to heal and thrive.
Seo-joon was deeply moved by her generosity.
He had expected her to ask for something for herself, but instead, she was thinking of others. That's a wonderful idea, he said, his voice choked with emotion.
I will. I promise.
And so, the Park Min-joon Foundation was born. Seo-joon poured his energy and resources into the foundation, working tirelessly to provide support and opportunities for underprivileged children. He established scholarship programs, funded medical research, and built community centers in underserved areas. He even invited Hannah to serve on the board of directors, ensuring that her vision remained at the heart of the organization. Meanwhile, Seo blossomed under Hannah's guidance. Hannah encouraged her to pursue her artistic talents, providing her with art supplies and connecting her with local artists. Seo's confidence grew as she started exhibiting her artwork and receiving recognition for her talent. Seo-joon, touched by Seo's spirit, ensured her comfort and supported her in every way he could, upgrading her wheelchair and making sure she had access to all the resources she needed. One evening, a few months after the foundation was established, Seo-joon found himself sitting on the beach again, this time with Min-joon and Hannah by his side. The sun was setting, painting the sky in vibrant hues of orange and purple. Min-joon, now a picture of health and vitality, was building a sandcastle, his laughter echoing in the gentle breeze.
Hannah sat beside Seo-joon, her eyes sparkling with happiness. Thank you, Seo-joon said, turning to Hannah. For everything. You changed our lives. Hannah smiled.
You changed your own lives, Mr. Park.
You just needed a little guidance.
Seo-joon looked at his son, his heart overflowing with love. He had learned that true wealth wasn't measured in dollars and cents, but in the connections he made and the love he shared. He had learned that miracles weren't always grand gestures, but often came in the form of quiet acts of kindness and unwavering belief. And he had learned that even in the darkest of times, there was always hope. As he watched Min-joon playing in the sand, he knew that his son's future was bright. He knew that he would continue to face challenges, but he also knew that he would never be alone. He had a family, a community, and a purpose. And that was all that mattered.
The waves continued to crash against the shore, a constant reminder of the ebb and flow of life.
But as Seo-joon sat there, surrounded by the people he loved, he felt a sense of peace and contentment he had never known before. He had offered $2 million for a cure, but he had received something far more valuable in return, a second chance at life, a renewed sense of purpose, and the unwavering love of his son. And in that moment, he knew that he was the luckiest man in the world.
Mrs. Kim, watching them from a distance, smiled to herself.
She had seen Seo-joon transform from a driven, isolated businessman into a loving and compassionate father. She had witnessed the healing power of human connection and the transformative impact of selfless acts. And she knew that Min-joon was in good hands, surrounded by people who loved him and cared for him deeply. The $2 million had been a catalyst, but the true cure had come from within, from the unwavering love and belief that had brought them all together. The surprise wasn't just that Hannah had helped Min-joon, but how she had helped them all. The years that followed were a tapestry woven with threads of joy, resilience, and unwavering commitment. The Park Min-joon Foundation flourished, expanding its reach to support not only medical initiatives but also educational programs and artistic endeavors for children from disadvantaged backgrounds. Seo-joon dedicated himself to the foundation's mission, often visiting schools and hospitals, sharing his story and inspiring others to embrace compassion and empathy. Hannah remained a guiding force, her intuitive understanding of human needs shaping the foundation's direction. She established workshops focused on holistic healing practices, incorporating art therapy, mindfulness techniques, and nature-based activities to promote well-being. Her quiet strength and unwavering belief in the potential of every child touched countless lives. Min-joon grew into a bright and compassionate young man. He excelled in his studies, developing a keen interest in science and technology. He never forgot the challenges he had faced as a child, and he was determined to use his knowledge and skills to make a difference in the world. He volunteered at the foundation, assisting with research projects and mentoring younger children who were facing health challenges. One day, Min-joon approached his father with an idea. "Dad," he said, I want to develop a new diagnostic tool that can detect diseases early, before they become serious. Seo-joon was deeply moved by his son's ambition. He knew that Min-joon's personal experience had fueled his desire to help others. "That's a wonderful goal, Min-joon," he said.
"The foundation will support you in any way we can."
With the foundation's backing, Min-joon assembled a team of talented scientists and engineers. They worked tirelessly, developing a revolutionary diagnostic device that could analyze blood samples with unprecedented speed and accuracy. The device could detect a wide range of diseases, including cancer, heart disease, and infectious illnesses, at their earliest stages, allowing for timely intervention and treatment. The invention was a resounding success. It was adopted by hospitals and clinics around the world, saving countless lives and improving the health and well-being of millions of people.
Min-joon was hailed as a visionary innovator, and his work was recognized with numerous awards and accolades.
Despite his success, Min-joon remained humble and grounded. He never forgot the lessons he had learned from Hannah and his father. He understood that true fulfillment came not from personal achievement but from serving others and making a positive impact on the world.
Meanwhile, Zoe's artistic talent continued to blossom.
Her paintings, characterized by their vibrant colors and emotional depth, gained international recognition. She used her art to raise awareness about disability rights and to promote inclusivity and acceptance. She established an art therapy program for children with disabilities, providing them with a creative outlet to express themselves and heal from their emotional wounds. One evening, Seo-joon, Min-joon, Hannah, and Mrs. Kim gathered at their home to celebrate the foundation's 10th anniversary. The house was filled with laughter and joy as they reminisced about the past and looked forward to the future. "I can't believe it's been 10 years, Seo-joon said, his voice filled with emotion.
"It feels like just yesterday that I was desperately searching for a cure for Min-joon. And look at us now," Hannah said, smiling. "We've come so far." "It's all thanks to you, Hannah," Seo-joon said. "You showed us the way."
"We all played a part," Hannah replied. "It took a community to heal Min-joon, and it takes a community to make the world a better place." Mrs. Kim, who had been quietly observing the scene, stepped forward. "You know," she said, "I always believed that Min-joon was destined for great things. He has a kind heart and a strong spirit."
Min-joon smiled at Mrs. Kim. "Thank you, Mrs. Kim," he said.